You ever kept a secret so heavy that it physically hurt to smile through family dinners, knowing what you knew, watching everyone else act like the world made sense? 3 weeks before my brother's wedding, I found out my parents were worth $4.2 million. And I had to stand next to my future sister-in-law at the rehearsal dinner, hold my glass of Niagara Riesling, and pretend I'd spent the afternoon reorganizing my closet. I'm a dental hygienist. I work out of a clinic in Guelph, Ontario, the kind of place where the most dramatic thing that happens on a Tuesday is a patient fainting during a cleaning. I drive a 2019 Hyundai Elantra that I'm still paying off. I meal prep on Sundays and I think owning at No Frills is genuinely satisfying. My life is, by every measurable standard, ordinary. And I used to think that about my parents too. My parents have a 3-bedroom house in Fergus, about 20 minutes north of me. Dad spent 34 years working for a municipal water authority. Mom taught grade 4 at the same elementary school until she retired. They drove used Corollas. They took one vacation a year, usually somewhere they could drive to. Muskoka, PEI, once Nova Scotia when my brother and I were teenagers, and we spent the entire trip arguing about who got the window seat. They clipped grocery flyers. They bought their winter coats on sale in March for the following year. That was the version of my parents I knew. That was the version of my parents I thought was the whole story. My brother. I'll call him by what I always call him, which is just my brother, because he hates when I introduce him to people at parties. Had been with Vanessa for 3 years before he proposed. The proposal happened at a Maple Leafs game, on the Jumbotron, which Vanessa later told everyone was iconic and told me specifically was, honestly, the least he could do considering how long I waited. She said it with a laugh. She always said things like that with a laugh. Vanessa is not a bad person. I want to be careful about that. Because this story is easy to flatten into something it isn't. She's not a villain. She's just someone who grew up in a particular way. Her family had money, visible money, the kind that announces itself in granite countertops and European ski trips, and the casual certainty that things will work out because things have always worked out. She married my brother believing he came from a similar world. I don't think she ever asked directly. I think she just assumed. My brother let her assume. The call from my parents came on a Wednesday evening in early October. I'd just gotten home from a late shift. Still had that artificial mint smell on my hands that never quite washes off. And I was standing in my kitchen eating crackers over the sink when my mom's name lit up my phone. "Can you come for dinner on Saturday?" she asked. "Just you. Don't mention it to your brother." I should have known something was strange from that sentence alone. My parents don't do secrets. They don't do drama. When my dad had a health scare 2 years ago, turned out to be nothing, a shadow on an x-ray that resolved itself, he called both of us at the same time on a 3-way call so neither of us heard it second. That's just how they operate. Equitable. Transparent. A little boring, in the best possible way, so I went. Dinner was pot roast, which meant something was either very wrong or very celebratory, because my mom only makes pot roast for occasions. I sat at the kitchen table I'd done homework at for 12 years, and watched my dad pour me a glass of water and then sit down across from me with the slightly stiff posture of someone who has rehearsed what they're about to say. "We want to talk to you about the estate," he said. I actually laughed. I said something like, "What estate?" Because the word estate in relation to my parents felt absurd. Estate was for people who had summer properties and lawyers on retainer. Estate was not for people who reused plastic bags and kept a dish of loose change by the front door for parking meters. My mom slid a folder across the table. I won't go through every number because some things deserve to stay private, but the summary is this. My parents had been quietly, methodically building wealth for decades. Not through anything flashy. Index funds started in the 80s, a small rental property in Cambridge they'd bought in the 90s and never talked about. My dad's defined benefit pension, life insurance policies, my mom's teacher's pension, and 30-something years of living far below what they could have afforded. The total value of the estate, including the house, was approximately $4.2 million. I stared at the folder for a long time without saying anything. "We've spoken to a financial planner and an estate lawyer," my dad said. "We want to gift a significant portion to you now while we're alive, through a formal deed of gift." It's something people do, the lawyer explained. There are tax implications either way, and we'd rather see you benefit from it while we're here to watch. The number they were giving me was $1.8 million. I cried. I'm not someone who cries easily. I once watched a colleague drop a full tray of sterilized instruments and didn't flinch. But I sat at that kitchen table in Fergus and cried into my mom's pot roast in a way that felt like it came from somewhere very deep. Then I asked the question that had been forming since I opened the folder. What about my brother? My parents looked at each other, that specific look, the one they'd been exchanging across rooms my entire life, the one that contains an entire conversation in about half a second, passed between them. We're going to make provisions for your brother, my dad said carefully. But we'd like you to keep this private for now, at least until after the wedding. I didn't push. They were clearly not ready to explain the whole thing, and I trusted them the way you trust people who have never, in 31 years, given you a reason not to. What I didn't understand yet was that the difference in what they were giving each of us wasn't arbitrary. It was intentional, and it was a test they'd been designing for years. The next 3 weeks were surreal in the particular way that secrets make everything surreal. I go to work and clean someone's teeth and think about $1.8 million sitting in a folder in my parents' house. I drive past my bank and feel faintly dizzy. I kept the same routines. Gym on Tuesdays and Thursdays, grocery run on Saturday morning, Sunday meal prep. Because I didn't know what else to do with myself. Meanwhile, the wedding preparations were accelerating in the specific chaotic way that Vanessa ran things, which is to say loudly, expensively, and with total conviction that her preferences were simply facts. The venue was a restored heritage property in Elora, genuinely beautiful, the kind of place that photographs like a dream, the kind of place that also cost roughly what I used to make in 8 months. My parents were contributing to the wedding costs. Vanessa had never asked what that contribution meant to them. She'd accepted it the way she accepted most things, graciously, quickly, and without looking too closely. I started noticing things about Vanessa. I'd been too fond of her, or too used to her, to register clearly before. The way she'd walk through my parents' house with a particular kind of slow, evaluating attention, running her hand along the mantelpiece, looking at the furniture in the living room, that I'd always read as genuine appreciation, but was starting to read differently. The way she'd said during one of our early wedding planning dinners, "Your family's house must be worth a decent amount now, even in Fergus, the way the market's been." Not as a question. More like she was confirming something she'd already calculated. The way she'd mentioned, laughing, to one of her friends at the engagement party, I was standing close enough to hear, that she was marrying into old quiet money, which was her phrase, which she seemed to find charming. Like she'd discovered a vintage bottle of something good in an unlikely cellar. My brother heard it too. He didn't correct her. I want to be fair to my brother here because I love him and because this is complicated. He didn't lie to Vanessa about our parents. He just never clarified anything. He let her build a picture and didn't tell her where the picture was wrong. I understood the impulse. Vanessa came from a family where money was status. And I think my brother was afraid that if she knew they'd grown up shopping at Value Village and driving cars with 200,000 kilometers on them, something would shift. I think he was afraid it already had. The week before the wedding, my mum called me again. "We're ready to explain the rest," she said. I drove back up to Fergus that Sunday. This time there was no pot roast, just tea, and my parents sitting at the kitchen table looking like they'd made a decision they were at peace with. The explanation was this. For the past several years, my parents had been watching both of us. Not in a surveillance way, in the way that parents who love their children watch them, paying attention, drawing conclusions. They'd watched how I handled the period after I had to replace my car's transmission and couldn't afford both that and my RRSP contribution that year. I made the repair, ate into savings, didn't complain, rebuilt slowly. They'd watched how my brother handled the same period. Borrowed from them, paid back most of it, didn't track the rest. They'd watched how I talked about money, what I prioritized, whether I was building anything or just spending what came in. They weren't judging him. They loved him, but they were clear-eyed. And then Vanessa entered the picture, and they watched that too. They'd watched Vanessa talk about the wedding budget with my mom, and mention, in a way clearly designed to land somewhere, that families like yours probably don't think twice about this kind of thing. They'd watched my brother not disagree. They'd watched Vanessa redecorate a conversation in their living room, my parents' living room, by mentioning twice that the layout would be so much better with different furniture. They weren't angry. My mum said it more than once. We're not angry. What they were certain. The gift to you isn't because we love you more, my dad said. You know that's not how it works with us. He paused. It's because we trust you with it, and because we think you need to be protected. I asked what he meant by protected. He said it quietly, because if Vanessa ever finds out the full picture, she and your brother will come to you, and we want you to be in a position to make clear choices about what you do and don't give. I sat with that for a long time. There's a particular quality to being truly seen by your parents, not just loved, which is different, but seen, understood, recognized as a specific person rather than a general category of beloved child. I felt that in that kitchen on that Sunday, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't mean everything. The wedding was on a Saturday in mid-November. It snowed lightly, which made the heritage property in Elora look like something from a greeting card. Vanessa was stunning. My brother cried during the vows, which he would deny to his grave. I stood in the receiving line and hugged people I barely knew and drank champagne and thought about almost nothing except how strange it is to stand in the middle of your ordinary life, holding a secret like a stone in your pocket. The moment came during the reception dinner. Vanessa's mother, a precise, well-maintained woman from Oakville who had spent most of the evening comparing the venue favorably to others she'd attended in considerably wealthier contexts, leaned across the table toward my mom and asked, with genuine warmth but the specific directness of someone who considers social capital a currency, "So, are your parents still in the area? Where did the family money come from originally?" My mum smiled. It was a real smile, not a tight one. "My husband worked for the municipality for most of his career," she said. "I taught elementary school. We were very fortunate." Vanessa's mother nodded, recalibrating slightly. "Of course, teachers' pensions are quite good," she said, in the tone of someone being generous. "They are," my mum agreed pleasantly, and changed the subject to the floral arrangements. I caught my mum's eye from across the table. She raised her glass a fraction of an inch. It was 2 weeks after the wedding when my brother called me. He'd been going through some things at my parents' house, he said, helping with some paperwork, and he'd come across a document that had confused him. He was calm on the phone, but I knew my brother's calm. It was the calm of someone standing very still because they didn't know what direction to move in yet. I told him to come to my place. He sat on my couch with his jacket still on, which he only does when he's upset, and I made coffee we both ignored, and he said, "Can you explain what I found?" I told him everything. Not in a defensive way, not in a way designed to position myself as right, and him as wrong. I just told him what had happened in order, the way you tell someone the truth when you love them and the truth is complicated. He was quiet for a long time. "They gave you more because they don't trust me," he finally said. "They gave me more because they trust me with it," I said. "That's not the same thing." He knew I was right. I could see it in the particular way he looked at the coffee table, which is the same expression he'd had at 16 when our parents had caught him in a lie he couldn't talk his way out of. Not defiant, just reckoning. "She's going to find out eventually," he said. "I know." "And she's going to want, I know," I said again. "And you're going to have to figure out what you tell her and why. That's not mine to manage." He sat with that for a while. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I think I knew," he said, "not the specifics. But I knew something was off. I kept letting her think things that weren't true because it was easier than having the conversation." He paused. "That's not a good way to start a marriage." "It's the most honest thing my brother has said to me in years, maybe ever. I don't know exactly what happened after that in his marriage. That's his story. What I know is that the conversation about money, the real conversation, the honest one, the one that should have happened before the Jumbotron proposal and the heritage venue and the champagne, happened eventually. Vanessa did not take it well initially. There was a period of several weeks when my brother and I weren't talking much, and my parents were very quiet in the way they get quiet when they're respecting someone else's process. But she didn't leave. And more importantly, neither did he. What I know is that my brother started dealing in truth, maybe for the first time in that relationship, and whatever he and Vanessa are building now is built on something more real than what came before. What I know is that I called my parents the week after my conversation with my brother and said, "I think I understand what you did." And my dad said, "We hoped you might." And my mom made a sound on the phone that was somewhere between a laugh and something else. What I know is that I'm still driving the 2019 Elantra. I still meal prep on Sundays. I moved into a better apartment. Not extravagant, just more space and a building that doesn't have a mold problem in the laundry room. And I opened a first home savings account because owning something in this market feels, for the first time, like a real possibility rather than a thought experiment. And I know that the money my parents gave me sits in accounts I think about carefully and deliberately, the way they would. What my dad said the night he explained everything stays with me more than the numbers do. He said the money was never the point. The money was just the clearest way they had to say what they actually meant. What they actually meant was, "We see you. We have always seen you. And everything we worked for quietly, all those years, we worked for you to have options. We worked for you to be free." The real inheritance wasn't the 4.2 million. The real inheritance was 34 years of watching two people choose integrity over appearance. Every single time and every small decision, and understanding, finally, fully, what that actually costs and what it actually builds. I keep a photo in my fridge. It's old, from a camping trip to Algonquin, maybe 25 years ago. My dad is building a fire, and my mom is laughing at something off camera, and my brother and I are 8 and 6 years old, and completely filthy and completely happy. None of us knew anything about what was coming. None of us needed to. Some inheritances don't show up in documents. They show up in who you become. I think about the moment my brother sat on my couch with his jacket still on, and I keep coming back to one thing. None of what happened was really about money. The money was just the surface. Underneath it was a long series of choices. Small ones, quiet ones, the kind that don't feel like choices at the time, that eventually added up to something you can't ignore. My parents made choices like that for 34 years. They chose to live below what they could have afforded. They chose to say nothing, to let people assume, to not correct the picture Vanessa was building in her head. Not because they were passive, but because they were paying attention. There's a kind of wisdom in that. The kind that doesn't announce itself, that doesn't need to. They watched how we handled difficulty. They watched what we did when no one was keeping score. And when it mattered, they made a decision based on what they'd actually seen, not on what they hoped was true. My brother made different choices, not terrible ones. He's not a bad person, and I want to be clear about that. But he chose comfort over honesty again and again in small ways that compounded. He let Vanessa believe something because believing it made things easier. I understand that impulse completely. The hard conversation is always the one you keep putting off because today isn't the right day and next week will be better, and somehow it never is. But those silences become their own kind of statement. Eventually, the thing you didn't say is louder than anything you did. What I keep thinking about is resilience, not the motivational poster kind, but the real kind. The kind that looks like showing up for a Tuesday shift when your life is quietly upside down. The kind that looks like rebuilding your savings slowly after a bad year without making it a whole identity. My parents modeled that without ever naming it. They just did it, year after year. And I absorbed it the way you absorb things from people you grow up watching closely. And I think about integrity, the version of it that costs something. My parents could have lived more comfortably and chosen not to. My brother could have had one honest conversation early in his relationship and chose not to. I could have told Vanessa what I knew at any point during those weeks and chose not to, but for different reasons. Because it wasn't mine to tell. Because some truths belong to the person who needs to deliver them. There's a difference between secrecy that protects you and secrecy that protects someone else's chance to do the right thing themselves. What I didn't expect when this all settled was how much it clarified things for me. I'm not a different person than I was before that Wednesday phone call from my mom. I still drive to work the same way. I still find meal prepping genuinely satisfying in a way I can't fully explain, but I understand now that the way I move through ordinary life, carefully, honestly, without needing anyone to see it, was something I learned. It was given to me, the same way the money was given to me, by people who decided a long time ago that the two things were inseparable. The real inheritance was already inside me before my parents ever opened that folder. I just didn't have a name for it yet,